I tell people in the book to, reflect on what you're good at. If you are not someone who loves being in a kitchen and cooking and offering food, like, you have other skills, you have other assets and resources that you can put into helping someone and being there for them. Maybe you're a great note taker. Maybe, you love animals and you're willing to walk the dog, but just be very in tune with your own personal process. Whether that means that you have, your own therapy and you talk about it there, or you practice meditation or yoga. It's really important that you are aware of yourself first and making sure that you get your needs met so that you can be there for this person that you care about through the long haul.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Welcome to today's episode. I have Aly Bird with me today. She is a speaker, a coach, and an author. Her new book, titled Grief Ally, Helping People You Love Cope with Death, Loss, and Grief. And I'm so excited to have her on. We already warmed up our voices singing to each other right before we started recording. So I already know Aly's favorite song to warm her voice up to. So I'm excited to get to know you so well, Aly.
Oh, thank you so much, Kendra. I am so excited to be here. Yes, to sing to each other, to talk about anything. Yes.
It's always like good to break the ice and things. And even though we're going to be talking about a heavy topic, right, which is the aspect of death and grief and how to be able to be an ally, and which, by the way, if I say ally instead of Aly, now you guys know why, because this play on words with her name and the name of her title of her book will get very confusing. But yeah, so we'll be talking about all things. But let's talk a little bit about you. Let's find out, where is it that you live? I picked up on the accent, so let's share with the audience where you
Yes,
live,
I
Aly.
uh, I am Canadian and I live on Vancouver Island, which is on the west coast of Canada. Very wet, tropical rainforest, mountains, ocean. Yes, that's where I
Is
am in
this
the
where you
world.
grew up? Is this where you
No,
grew
I
up?
actually grew up in Ontario, outside of Toronto, um, quite rurally, actually. But
How
yes,
long
moved
ago
out
did you move
here.
to Vancouver? Yeah. When did you move?
We Will and I, my husband, moved out here in 2016. So
Okay. So
here for about 6 years.
okay. So then 2016 you moved there. Were you already married at that time to Will when you moved? Or was it
No, it was no, we had known each other for about 2 years at that point, and I wanted to go on an adventure, and his work moved him out here, and yeah, the rest is history.
would you please share a little bit about you and Will and how you met? You and Will,
Yeah,
because he is the reason you wrote this book.
he
So
is, he is. He was the love of my life, he remains the love of my life. So we met in 2014. I was recently single and I wanted to go on lots of dates. And instead, I bumped into Will and went on lots of dates with him. Uh, and
awesome.
yeah, I always say that he filled all the gaps that I never knew I had. Just had this zest for life that I hadn't witnessed in anyone, and it was very attractive. His body was wicked as well. And that's certainly something I appreciated. But we really bonded over a love for adventure and outdoor sports. So when he had the opportunity to move out to the West Coast, I was like, I love you enough to tag along, and let's do this thing. And yeah, we moved to Vancouver Island and had this really beautiful outdoorsy rock climbing, mountain biking, hiking, swimming, uh, yeah, just really beautiful, adventurous lifestyle together. But that also was what took him from me. So Will died in a hiking accident at the end of 2019, completely unexpectedly. Um, and that has sent me on this wild ride that is grief and living with unexpected loss.
Mm. Yeah, you did mention the hiking, but I wasn't sure like what it was. So he was by himself when he went
He
hiking,
was with a
or
friend,
he was with a friend? Okay.
but I wasn't there. No.
Here you are, your life just changed drastically. 2019, the love of your life now not by your side in the same way.
Yep.
And now you're having to navigate life. Your life just kind of started to take different turns. What were you doing prior to that, like in terms of studies, and how did it now shift for you now, even now studying psychology in the aspect of counseling and being able to also
Yeah.
coach people through grief therapy?
Yeah. So I have an earlier degree in social planning and community development. So I was in that world. Have always been very interested in people and helping people make the most of the lives that they have. Social justice, human rights. I'm all about it. So I was working on kind of like a community development level. And then when we moved out here, I started to get into coaching. So I was working with young people and helping them navigate life transitions, whether that was switching jobs, big moves. I know, so strange.
So already you were in the
I was
life
already,
transition space. That is
yes, yes.
crazy. Like, you
And
saw
it
my
was kind
mouth,
of,
like, as it
yeah,
went like
your
that,
mouth dropped.
that it's
Yeah,
like, "What?"
yeah. And I think, I didn't really have a name for it at the time, but after Will's death, being kind of thrown into this world of grief, all of a sudden having the language for what my clients were experiencing prior to that. Although it wasn't death related loss, there was grief in those situations and those changes that they were experiencing. And as I was having my own grief experience, um, I discovered that I was a very like cognitive griever. Like it was happening more in my brain than my body through like an emotional expression. I was just like consumed with like, and what brought me relief is like, what is happening to me?
You
Like,
needed to understand the technicality of everything
yes,
that
the
was going on in
science
your
and the
mind, in your body.
biology.
Interesting.
Yes. So as I was doing that, I was like, "Oh, this is fascinating to me," and it's kind of sent me down a path of psychology, which is where I am now, studying counseling psychology, hoping to work as a grief therapist in the near future, and more specialized in like traumatic bereavement, which was my experience. But then also, I am a problem solving kind of griever. And I noticed that there wasn't a resource for people who wanted to show up and help me. I have the smartest, most brilliant friends in the world, and there wasn't a go to resource for them. They were having to mine all these other books and articles and blogs that were written for people like me at the epicenter of something tragic. Whereas, like, I didn't have the, the, the full brain capacity to kind of dive into that and then push that information outwards towards them and be like, this is what I need you to do, and this is how I need you to act, and this is what I need you to say. um, and so I was like, I'm gonna build something for them based on our own experience, which I had a really positive, like, it was still terrible, but my friends never made me feel alienated or misunderstood or abandoned. They were right there making mistakes despite being afraid. So I took everything that we kind of learned, as well as this, what is happening in my brain, in my body, culturally, psychologically, and built this tool, which has become Grief Ally, my book. And I'm hoping that other people can have the kind of experience that I have had in my grief. Not that it's not terrible and painful, but it's just a little bit better.
You
Yeah.
no, you explained it. You summed it up so well. And what you explained in terms of the mental capacity of someone that's grieving, of how are you going to be able to tell them what it is you needed? That is so important because a lot of times, for example, even this podcast is a tool, right? But
Yes.
can someone that's in that moment of grief, would listening to something be the right tool for them in that moment? Would reading something be the right tool for them in that moment? That's on that topic, right? Of grief and feeling that
Yes.
companionship. We don't know. Everybody's different into what it is that they can assimilate. But what our mind is able to capture in moments like that of trauma, and when it's just so scattered brain with just so
Yes.
much, there's so much going on in that, not only emotionally but mentally, with everything that's changed in someone's life, particularly in also in the case of your life partner. There's so many
Yeah.
things you have to decide, closing bank accounts, this XYZ, all these things, that how were they would there be room to then also, here's a blog, like you said, here's a blog about how you can tell me if I want a chicken casserole or lasagna for lunch
Yeah. Yeah.
tomorrow. Or
Exactly.
so that is wonderful that now where you're kind of in another space in your life, you're able to now create this resource for others. So when did the writing process start?
So the writing started very, very early, like literally, like day one after Will died. Someone told me, a dear friend who unfortunately has also passed away shortly after Will did, which was crazy.
Wow, that's
But
a lot. And yeah.
yeah, she came
Mm.
over right after she got the news, and she's like, they're gone, but you can still talk to them and you can write to them. And I was like, "Oh, okay." So, like, literally, like, that day, like, I went to my bedroom and I just, like, I started writing. And it was more of, like, free flow journaling, but journaling became kind of like a lifeline for me, through those early days. And, so Will died at the end of November, and by the end of February, I was like, I think I have an idea. And like I'm feeling very called to like keep writing, but doing it in a more targeted way. And I think I have a book idea. So the book idea didn't become fully formed until probably like, let's say, like 6 months, 8 months after Will died, but it happened very, very quickly. And yeah, I'll just reiterate that. Yeah, it has been a lifeline. It is what the thing that has kind of been like, if I keep chipping away at it, um, because it brings me joy. When it didn't bring me joy, I put it down and like let it breathe a little bit. But it was also like this kind of space that I carved out in my life where I it was time on my own, but it was also time that I spent with Will and our memories, and it was a way of kind of keeping that relationship growing rather than exclusively being something stagnant in the past that happened to me. It was, we were building this thing together from a really tragic place. But I really enjoyed that, and I still enjoy being able to talk about it because it is part of like the legacy of what we got to experience together.
I love that because you touched on the fact of continuing this relationship, and
Yeah.
just how it is for you was through writing and continuing this bond. And that is something that for a lot of people that have someone that's died or transitioned, or however we want to call this
Mhm.
other change of reality, that helps us helps us keep on, really, like, is
Yeah.
having that connection, and that it doesn't necessarily mean the end, it's just different. So you used
Yeah.
writing as that way of continuing your relationship with Will. So beautiful. The something that came to mind as you were talking, and how writing, you know, how writing was something that came naturally, and we were talking earlier about music.
Mm.
Can you tap into how the arts and how expression, not only for you, but also as you've coached other people that have gone through transitions, have played a part in a person's journey? And now that you're studying psychology, what have you learned about that aspect of expressing pain through the artistic way, and that kind of navigating it that way, how that helps
Mm.
us in that journey? It's a loaded question.
Well, that's a lot of points.
Yeah.
I will start with,
Take a whatever chunk out of it. Take any little chunk of it.
yeah, I'll start just from my own personal experience that, I have never experienced such wild creativity as I have in the last 3.5 years that Will has died. Through writing, through like fine arts, I'm making like big mixed media pieces. I'm like doodling and drawing and coloring. I colored so hard that I gave myself carpal tunnel in my hand, after he died. And I think uh, grief grief is energy. If we look at it, it is the energy that is created when attachment changes. And that energy needs to be expressed, whether it is expressed through, you know, emotion, or through creation, or through doing. And art is one of those really wild tools that offers expression in so many like emotional ways, in cognitive ways, like from like planning the project to like free flow, like doing things with your hands. It's just a great way to like tap into both like your head and your heart, and move through things that are confusing, difficult, joyous. I think art is just something that's so powerful. And personally, I don't actually have a lot of experience like in the psychology of art, but I can only imagine what the literature says. I can only speak to my own personal experience, and then also speaking with other people who are expressing their pain and their love, through art, as something very, very effective.
When you said about the part about the last 3 years, your creativity just kind of bursting, I was like, you saw my expression, because I feel that grief opens up this window of seeing life just differently. It's as if you put on these glasses and you see pain more, you see beauty more. Like when I'd go out on walks of nature, I'm like, wow, the sky is so blue. Like, wow, like you notice things, that your perception of life is just different. So at
Yes.
least let me just put it again, like you said it, in my own experience, that's what I have witnessed personally in my grief journey. And as you're sharing that, the same, like the arts, I remember even in middle school, heartbreak, right? Like you're talking about life
Mm,
transitions, heartbreak, or things like that. That was grief. That's when I would write poems, songs, all
yeah.
these things were always in these moments of grief.
Yeah.
So most songs are about heartbreak, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
right, it's
And
just
I think for me too, it was like a the art that I've created, at least at a tangible art. And I don't mean like the book itself or in writing. I mean more of like these like mixed media pieces. It's
medium. Mhm.
always trying to like demonstrate what I am feeling. Like I'm trying to like paint a picture of what this feeling is. I'm
because the
trying to
words
like give
don't
it some sort of
suffice.
representation. Exactly.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so hard to
Um,
put it into words, right? Something so then you're like,
yes.
how do I get this out?
Give me
I
other tools.
love yes.
Yes.
I love how you said the energy, I've heard, it was Andrew Garfield once in an interview talking about
Oh,
his mom dying,
yes.
how he said grief
Yes.
is love, so that you just didn't get to express, and so how you
Mhm.
talk about it in that energy, we know love is energy, grief is energy. So it's just that way of expressing. And so it's beautiful. Okay, now let's talk about the ways in which someone can be an ally and how in your journey then you started then writing this book as part of your process and with this idea and what your friends had done to help you in your journey. What is it? Let's talk, what is a grief ally?
Yeah, so I'd say like a grief ally is someone who respects your unique experience of grief. They offer unconditional love and empowerment so that you can move through grief in really the kind of easiest way possible. In a nutshell, that's a grief ally. And it's a hard job. It's not something that anyone ever wishes to be in, but the reality is that one of the only guarantees in life that we have is that you will die. People die. Um, and so it's really important that we equip ourselves with the tools that will enable us to help others when they inevitably experience grief.
Mhm. And one of the chapters you have is regarding taking care of yours in order to take care of someone. I'm not saying the exact name of the chapter, but it was in order to
That's
take care of
okay.
someone else, you need to be able to also take care of yourself in that
Yes.
process. So let's talk about the importance of self-care as you're also giving toward to others in their journey. And you mentioned about life transitions as you yourself having been
Yes.
a coach. This goes for anything. If someone, you can be a grief ally if somebody's going through a divorce, if someone's going through, there's many ways in which you're going to be there for someone. If their children left for college and they're
Yes.
home alone now and they're having to
Yeah.
deal with that transition, you will be a grief ally for that person. So let's talk about the part of taking care of ourselves as we help someone navigate their grief.
Yeah, so in the book Grief Ally, every chapter starts with a guiding promise. In the self-help chapter, the promise is, "I promise to take good care of myself so that I can take good care of you." And what that really means is, and what you have to understand about grief is that it is not a short-term process. It is a long haul, and the reality is that you're always kinda gonna feel something about a loss. And taking care of yourself is important because this is an endurance sport. This isn't a sprint. And if you are not taking care of yourself, you will burn out. You will not be able to finish this race. And the reality is that this person that you want to show up for, needs you to be there through the long haul. It's not just the bring the lasagna after the funeral, send a card, send flowers, and then, bing bang, we're done. It's much more emotionally intimate, and being present to a lot of pain and suffering, possibly. And that's a difficult position to be in. So it's very important that you are aware of your own needs, aware of your own thoughts and feelings, and that you are seeking help when you need it. Um, so you can't be everything for someone. I tell people in the book to, reflect on what you're good at. If you are not someone who loves being in a kitchen and cooking and offering food, like, you have other skills, you have other assets and resources that you can put into helping someone and being there for them. Maybe you're a great note taker. Maybe, you love animals and you're willing to walk the dog, but just be very in tune with your own personal process. Whether that means that you have, your own therapy and you talk about it there, or you practice meditation or yoga, it's really important that you are aware of yourself first and making sure that you get your needs met so that you can be there for this person that you care about through the long haul.
It is so valuable, everything you said, because you mentioned different ways in which someone can be an ally. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be the one to listen to everything that they're going through emotionally. It could be that the way
Yeah.
that you are able to show up is, like you said, be walking their dogs or any other way. Like knowing your own strengths is important.
Hmm.
And in that process, when you're offering to the person that's grieving, say, listen, I I can come Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and these are the things I'm really good at and can help you with. I'm great at tidying up. Do you have any closets I can kind of go through, or do you have, right? Like, or I'm great at
Yeah.
walking the dog. Something specific, and I've learned that in this process of interviewing people because I used to do the blanket thing. It was like, anything you need, I'm here. But just like you said, with a grief brain,
Yeah.
you don't even know what you need, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think that it's important to also be like mindful of the timeline as well. And it's not just, that first few weeks. Like people, especially with a traumatic loss, like shock is a very real thing. I didn't really feel anything until 6 weeks after Will died. And at that point, that's when all I was having this really intense like emotional waves. But by that point, the support had kind of weaned a little bit. And then I had to be more proactive in getting the help that I needed. Whereas if people understood that, grief is a long haul, that if someone doesn't take you up on your offer, week 1, week 2, that doesn't mean that they won't need it. Like follow up month 2, month 3, um, and see if you can offer support then.
And what would be great? What would be a good way of following up? Let's say month 2, would you send a text? Let's give some quick little
Mhm.
tips like someone can do. Like, would you send a text saying, "Hey, checking in on you, just letting you know I'm thinking of you," or like what would be some ways in which someone could reach
Yeah,
out to check in?
absolutely. I'll preface this with saying, do not ask a specific question unless you have the capacity to be present with that person as they answer your question. So I think a lot of people, reach out and be like, "Hey, how are you?" They're not okay. Let's just assume off the bat they are not okay. And to assume that they will say they are okay is not fair. But also, if they tell you their real feelings, like you have to be prepared to hear their real feelings. There were a couple of circumstances where people would reach out to me and be like, "Hey, how are you?" And then I would answer their question honestly, and then they wouldn't respond for 24 hours,
They wouldn't
48
know what to do.
hours.
Yeah, with that, they're like,
Exactly.
I feel like the world is swallowing me whole, and then
Exactly, and
crickets
that
on
would
the
just
other end.
silence them. Exactly.
Yeah.
So when we're reaching out, if you are going to ask the question, just be prepared. Like, that's part of that self-care process, right? Like, be mindful that you are entering this situation where the landscape is unstable and you don't know what you're going to expect. So if you are aware of that, that helps just off the bat. And then definitely like say like you can reiterate the message that you sent at like week 1, week 2 being like, "Hey, I'm still thinking about you. My offer of coming to help you tidy up on Tuesdays and Wednesdays still stands. Um, this offer is always open. Like, please let me know if I can help now. And is it okay? Or if they say yes or no, maybe they say no, say, is it okay if I check in another month? I think it's really important to be like upfront and to take the responsibility off the shoulders of the person who is at the that you're trying to care for, giving them the opportunity to reach out, sure, but also say like, here is what I am willing to do for you, and here is the timeline that I am willing to do it. I think a lot of you hear the message like, don't disappear as a grief ally and someone in a support role, like don't disappear. But I think people have this idea that this timeline of grief is so short that they message like, every 2 or 3 days for the first month. And then if the person that they're trying to help doesn't respond or isn't like taking advantage of their offers, that like they're doing okay. And I would argue that the complete opposite is probably true. Like in that first month, they are probably just trying to like stay alive, literally, and
Mhm.
don't disappear. Like if they're not responding to you, maybe it's just the timeline that's wrong. It's not your offering. It's not you. It's
Yeah,
literally
don't take
like they
things
are doing
personally. Do not
exactly. They
take
are
things
doing the best
personally.
they can. They are doing the best they can with the resources that they have at that moment. So, like, just revisit it a month down the road, 2 months, like even a year. I don't think like there is never a wrong time to reach out to someone and offer support in whatever capacity that you have it. The grief
Mhm.
doesn't go away. It's always there. There are always things that are going to be hard. Um, and acknowledging the loss, acknowledging how hard things can be is can be really, really powerful for someone who feels as though their loss is being forgotten.
Because the loss being forgotten can make them feel as if their person is being forgotten as well.
Exactly. Yeah. I have like a great story. So this last fall was the 3 year anniversary of Will's death, and I spent a month in Palm Springs, and I invited some people. We called it grief camp because November is traditionally a hard month for me. And Will was a member of the Canadian Forces, so my friend and I we went to the Veterans Day parade in downtown Palm Springs, and she didn't know Will very well. But we watched the parade because I wanted to watch the parade, and it was a lovely like extension of like her being like, how can I support you in this tough month? And then like as we were walking back to the car, she's like, oh, what would Will think of this parade? And like just that like simple question was like the one of my greatest fears is that like I am going to have to be the person who brings him up in conversation for the rest of my life. And the fact that she brought him up and the fact that she was willing to have a conversation about this day and him and how it impacted me was huge. Like literally like that simple question and the few sentences that followed like that like a simple question was so meaningful, and it really just brought me comfort and made that situation like feel so much more ease in that because I wasn't the one carrying my loss, it was she helped me carry it in that moment.
Hmm. Now, what
Yeah.
would Will have thought? Now, I wanted to know the answer. What did you answer? What would he have thought of that
Of the
parade?
parade.
Yes. Now
I
I want to
to be
know.
honest, I don't think he would have liked it very much. So in the States you have Veterans Day, but in Canada we have Remembrance Day. And the vibe of them is
Is it
very,
different
very
day?
different.
Is
No,
it
it's on the
different
same
than
day.
November? Okay, okay.
No, it's November
November 11th?
11th.
11th,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, November 11th.
In Canada, it's a very like solemn, quiet morning. There are moments of silence. Names are read out. The last call is played on a trumpet, and then everybody then it becomes a party. Like if you are a person who wears a uniform, it was like Will's favorite day. You just go out and get drunk and reminisce about like good times at the Legion. Veterans Day in the States is like starts as a celebration of like your soldiers and your veterans. And it's just like the vibe was different. I think Will liked the somberness and the that level of like respect and
Respect?
recognition.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting to now have experienced both.
But yeah, the part of remembering the memories, I tend to do that with my kids if they remember anything of their grandmother, my mom.
Mhm.
Like, oh, what is like a memory that you remember? Like, what is something you remember that you used to do with her, or things like that, just to keep it in the forefront of their mind, so that yeah, those memories don't. don't go away. I want to ask you about a
Yeah.
memory. Tell us about one of your adventures with Will. What was one of those things that you guys tried together yeah, your thrill seeker,
Mm.
adventurous partner and you tried?
Oh boy. Um, it's a great question. Uh,
Or which one's one that keeps coming up on your mind, like when you're
mm,
thinking of your memories of the things that you guys did?
there was one mountain that we were trying to climb, and we had tried it in August and didn't have time to make it to the summit. We had to turn around. And so we tried it again in September, and we pulled up to the trailhead, and I'm like getting my shoes on, and Will has like opened the trunk of the car, and he's like, "Oh no!" And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "I forgot my hiking boots." And I was like, "Oh." And
Oh.
I'm like, "Oh, we're gonna have to turn around. Like, we'll just go home. We'll try again another day." And he's like, "No." He's like, "We are gonna do this." And I'm like, "Okay." And he's wearing like dad sandals, like the Tevas with the Velcro. And he's like, "No, I'll just wear these." And I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "No, we're gonna do this." So he puts his socks on, puts on his Tevas, and
Real dad look there. That
oh
was
yeah, classic dad. And it was a journey of like we hiked to a certain spot, we like camped, and then leave our stuff, summit, come back, collect our stuff, and then head back to the car. And we summited the peak at, I think it was like 8 a.m. like the next day, and he's like capturing this video. He's like, "Check out my feet." And he did it. He climbed it in dad sandals. His calves were destroyed for days afterwards, but yeah, he was
because it's so
determined.
stiff,
And
right? It's stiff. There's no
well, it's
right?
stiff,
Those
but it doesn't have like a hiking boot has more ankle stability. So if you're
yeah,
carrying a
right.
pack on your back and the ground underneath you is unstable, that ankle stability in a hiking boot is much more useful than having to use all your stabilizer muscles in your lower limbs. But he was determined, and we made it. And yeah, that was the kind of go get 'em attitude that he had. Like, very
That
little would stop him from
that's the
achieving the
spark that
goal.
attracted you. That's what you
Yes,
were like, so his
exactly.
zest for life type of thing.
Exactly,
Now,
yes.
how are hikes for you now? What do hikes represent for you now? And yeah, what are they
Yeah,
for you
that's a
now?
great
And
question.
how are they been part of your journey, of your grief journey?
Mhm. I, um it's funny because people early in your grief will be like, "Oh, go for a walk. Go cry at the trees." Like, they don't care if you're crying. And to be very honest, like, it did not feel safe, um,
That was just
to be outside in, like, big nature for 2.5 years, honestly. And it's still, I haven't done anything big like that. I don't know if I will again, to be very honest. Like, that was the thing that Will and I really really bonded over. And to do it alone, or to do it with someone else, just doesn't feel right now. And that's kind of been my go-to decision making process through all of this. Like, if it doesn't feel good, don't do it unless you like really really have to. Only recently, when I was in the desert in the fall, I was able to do some hikes, but I just feel that like the landscape is completely different. It's not a place that Will and I visited together, so it was something that I was able to do and make it my own. I also have a dog now, which is funny because Will would have never let me have a dog. Um,
really? I was
he was
already
not a
even picturing I was already even picturing you guys having dogs because a lot of outdoorsy I
yes.
have 2 myself, but it's like, that have these companions that go on them with on their walks and their
Yeah.
treks and oh, so now you
No, because
have
we
a
also we
okay.
enjoyed traveling a lot as well, and it was harder
Mhm.
to travel when, you have a pup.
I
But
get
no,
it. Mhm.
yeah. I have a wonderful sheepadoodle now who, very much fills many of the needs that I have for for physical touch.
Huge. They're
And
the best.
yes,
They're the best companions for grief. Oh,
exactly. And she's also the like when I'm outside, if I forget there's a psychological term for it, but as I'm out there and I am talking to her about, oh, be careful here, like, okay, just step up here, like, oh, just a little further, like it's kind of like I'm talking to myself, but it
mhm.
I feel less crazy because I'm talking to my dog.
Of course. Of course. I hear you. And I've
Yeah.
got doodles too. I have two doodles, not sheepadoodles, but I have two
Oh.
doodles too. Yeah, they're so special. My 6-year-old, she was really, because I got her right. I say I, but we, it's a
Yeah.
family dog, but
Yeah.
I say I. It was my mom's birthday. That was our pickup. That was the day to pick her up. It was
Mm.
my mom's, and it was the first birthday since my mom had passed. So 2 months after my mom died, that was our pickup day for Evie. So she was literally like my little therapy dog, from there. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So
That's so
uh
funny that you mentioned that 'cause, Renegade is my dog's name.
Renegade.
I so it was peak COVID, so puppies were very expensive, and, I had to I so I'd made it a year with Will being gone, and I have a cat as well, and the cat was so sweet, but it was a big workload for my sweet little cat. So I finally decided, like, "Okay, I'm gonna get a dog, I'm gonna do this." But it was also a big, it's a big commitment to get a puppy,
Mhm.
and so my birthday is in January. I'm like, "I will put my name on a wait list for my birthday as a birthday gift to myself. If I end up not getting a puppy, it was a birthday gift, no worries. I can just let those funds go." But the night before my birthday, I'm like looking for like the right breeder. One of them just happens to have one puppy left. And they're like, you can pick the puppy up on Valentine's Day. And I was like, "Oh my goodness." And I was not a Valentine's Day person. Will brought me into the Valentine's world. He always spoiled me. He was so generous and so sweet. And I was like, "Oh my goodness." And his birthday is also the week of Valentine's Day.
Uh,
So it was just like, you know what? The stars are aligning. Like this puppy is meant to be with me. And it's probably one of the best decisions that I ever made in terms of my own mental health is yeah, she's just the best.
Oh, it's a renegade. I like it's a girl. She has a really powerful name,
Yeah,
is Renegade.
she does. Yes.
I love it. Yeah, the process of grief, as you were talking about your hikes, I also just thought of the trauma that it could be associated as well with the part of hiking too, if
Mhm.
that ended up, playing a part, not only because you would used to hike with him, but if that's what the way that his life ended, I would assume that that could, and that we shouldn't make assumptions, but that could be a big part of that too, because trauma can stay with us without even knowing. And I
Yes.
recently was watching a TV show that had to do with an airplane accident and survival. It's like a new thing. If anybody wants to cry a lot, go watch Dear Edward on Apple
Oh, I've
TV.
read the
Uh,
book. I've read the
oh
book.
my gosh! So
Yeah.
I had friends that died in an airplane accident in 1996, 95. Sorry, my
Oh.
sister died in 1996, 95. And so I did not, first episode of that. And I'm sitting here, my husband's kind of like, what is going on? And I'm just
Oh.
bawling. And I was like, I did not realize how much I still have in me
Yeah.
from that. So
Yeah.
the hiking component in your trauma, that
Mhm.
could tie in as well, right?
100%. And I'm not saying that like I early on I was like adamant that like hiking still had to be part of my life and I did the like the EMDR therapy to like,
Mhm.
move through some things.
Reprogram it. Mhm.
Yeah, and because I haven't done anything of that caliber yet, it hasn't come up, but I've kind of settled into like the mindset that like I don't have to do it if I don't want to.
Mm.
And I think
Yes.
early on I had this mindset that like I had to do it. That like that would be the only way of like maintaining a connection with Will, and that Will would want me to continue like doing these big hikes. And like I have no doubt that he would probably want me to do those things, but also
Mm,
Will is not the boss of my grief, and Will doesn't know
mm.
what it's like to live in a reality where he doesn't exist. So I get to make the rules here. And if I want to do that hike one day, I will put in the work to make it happen, but right now I don't have to do that if I don't want to.
You touched on something there regarding the having to, or these expectations that we put on ourselves based on what either others tell us,
Mhm.
oh, but he wouldn't want you to be sad. He wouldn't want you to be. So let's go into a little bit about that aspect of the mistakes as a grief ally that we might do, which might come into these kind of things that we might say,
Yeah.
and how we're not superheroes, as you say. We're we're so we're going
Yeah,
to
we're
make
human beings.
mistakes when we're human
Yeah.
beings. We're going to make mistakes as we're supporting someone. We might say things that would not be the right things to say, but how we can still dust off and carry on in that how does it say allyship
I
allyship
allyship. Allyship. I'm sorry. I've created some tongue
I'm like,
twisters.
ah,
It's
like,
my own
wait,
fault.
what is it? No, allyship. Thank you. I'm like, wait, how do I say that? Allyship. How? So
No
let's
problem.
share with us about that for our listeners, please.
Yeah. So I think, and I teach this in the book, the important thing to remember is that if you are willing to show up as a grief ally, you will make mistakes. There is no getting around it. Grief is too unique to every individual that even if you have been in a grief support role before, like us, you will not be able to apply the same lessons to this new person that you are trying to support. And if so I say like let's change up the mindset. Like if you are not making mistakes, that means you are not doing grief allyship right. It means that you are not close enough. But if you are close and you are making mistakes, you are doing grief allyship right. And the great thing about making mistakes is that they can be recovered from if you have like a strategic plan for how to do that. And I teach that in the book about how to recover from those mistakes. First thing is like get off the shame and blame emotional roller coaster that happens when we do make mistakes. Whether you do that with like an affirmation that's like simple as like I am here because I care and I make mistakes and that's okay, or you can talk to somebody else and just be like, oh my gosh, I did this thing and I can't believe I did it and I just need to talk about it. So first do that. Second, circle back to the person, which takes some courage. But say like, hey, I'm like feeling weird about when I did this or I said this. Did it feel weird, like and uncomfortable for you too? And they, if you have followed the steps in the book about empowering the person to do what it is that is best for them in their grief, if you are respecting their grief journey, if you are loving them unconditionally and they know all those things, like hopefully they have enough courage themselves to be like, yeah, that did make me feel a little bit uncomfortable. And then you just apologize. There are different ways to apologize, but at a like it's really simple. Just be like, yeah, I made a mistake and I'm sorry and I'll own up for that and I'll learn from this. And then you can kind of both go on your way. And I think people get caught up in the misconception that if you make a mistake, you will be rejected. And I believe that the reality is the complete opposite. That when you own up to making mistakes and you apologize for them, that you're actually like creating a stronger bond with that person that you're trying to support because you have more of like an open and honest relationship. And that's kind of what we're all striving for as human beings. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and know that you can recover from them. And it's not the end of the world. It's not going to end your relationship with that person. You have to really screw up to be rejected. I really don't think that's going to happen if you follow those steps.
Those are awesome because it is so true. A lot of times we don't. Now, that takes being intuitive too, to be able to know and read a situation to know that you might have made a mistake, because
Yes,
that's one thing too,
and I'll
because
I'll
you
add
might
that
not know.
it's true, you might not know, but I think also if you are practicing your own self-care, which is step number 1 as a grief ally, right? Like, being self-aware of what is happening, like, within your body, you know when it doesn't have to be, like, a blatant, like, "Oh, it was very obvious that I screwed up." Like, it just has to feel, like, a little bit uncomfortable and be like, "Oh,
Mhm.
that
That
was
didn't
a
feel
little
right. Yeah.
weird. That was a little
Mhm.
weird. I'm a little bit
Yeah.
I'm awkward."
Yeah, and
Um,
like when you see the reaction or how you felt, or when you're sensing the reaction of the person you're supporting, that it just wait, she didn't quite respond right. I maybe that was not the right thing to say,
yeah,
and owning up
and
to
it
it
can be
instead of
super
sweeping it under
simple.
the rug. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, like, I have, my best friend, like, sent me, like, an Instagram account, like, probably, like, around, like, month 5 or 6, and she's like, "Oh, I found this widow's Instagram account. What do you think?" And I'm like, "Mm." And she's like, "Oh, you didn't like it?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "Oh, okay, sorry. My bad. Won't happen again. I won't send you any more."
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Cool, thanks." And we're cool. We're good.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it doesn't have to be, the there are so many, like, micro moments for learning what someone what it will be useful to someone, in their
Mm.
grief. It's just a matter of being willing to listen and to watch for those things as well.
You've given so many different tips and insights. And thank you also for sharing your own story. I think that really the listeners are going to be able to relate to you and be able to grab this book and know that this is coming from someone who had this happen to them and what really helped you. So I appreciate you so much, Aly, for sharing that. Aly, is there anything I have not asked you that you'd want to make sure the listeners know? And we'll also then afterwards we'll say how they can grab the book. So, but anything that you want to leave for the listeners?
I think it's really important, that folks know that in grief, there's a lot of emotions running high constantly, and I think the best thing that anybody can do, whether it's a person who is grieving in the midst of their grief or someone in a grief ally role, is just let's just all work from the same assumption that people are doing the best that they can with the resources that they have. Nothing out there is malicious or an attempt to really hurt someone else. We are all just doing our best with some imaginable circumstances. Let's just all be really kind to one another.
Mhm. Thank you so much. Aly, let's talk about how people can get your book and who should get your book. I think everybody
Yeah.
should, because as you said, everybody's going to have to support someone in their grief journey. So how can they get it? And yeah, I'll make
Yeah.
sure to include that in the show notes.
Beautiful. So the book is called Grief Ally: Helping People You Love Cope with Death, Loss, and Grief. And you can buy it wherever you want to buy your books. It's available in paperback, as an ebook and an audiobook. So in any format that you want to take in that information, it's good for when, you get the news that something bad has happened, but it would also be a great book just to have on your shelf for when that moment does come. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me, on my website, alybird.com, or on social media at the Aly Bird.
Thank you once again. This was Aly Bird with us on the podcast. Grateful for you. Grateful for Will for being also in your life and inspiring now this artistic expression in you to now have a tool for others to help them in their own journey as they become allies of others that have dealt with their own grief. So thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. It was lovely to chat with you.
Thank you. Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.